Hi everyone, my name is Jane Lockhart and I'm a designer. I do interior and exterior work working in both residential and commercial spaces. I want to welcome you to our series here called Mad About Hue, where we talk about color both in sort of theoretical senses plus in really practical tips that you can actually use at home. If you're a designer or someone who works in the profession of design or architecture, you may find this interesting because some of it is actually very usable facts or information that we've discovered over the last 20 or 30 years of researching color. If you happen to like this, please subscribe or give this video a like, because then I know what to talk about in the future. This is our second in a series of color. Basically, this one we're going to focus on color psychology. How do I know how color makes me feel? Because people have very strong opinions about color, and I think we should talk about why people have so many strong opinions about it. So I'm going to have my trusty color wheel here, plus I'm going to show you some images, give us a jump off point to talk about where color works really, really well in your home and where it just doesn't. The title, Color Psychology, is really referencing how we feel about color and the observations that people have made both emotionally and through research studies over the course of the last 20 years. There are many colors that people have, as I mentioned, very strong opinions about and where they go. Most of those are not really backed up by science. That doesn't stop people, though, from talking about color and how they feel about it and what they think works in somewhere and what doesn't work somewhere else. When it comes down to it, any color is a good color if you like that color and it makes you feel good. Where people get into trouble is they tend to listen to other people. So let me give you a little bit of science, if you will, in terms of research that has proven to be somewhat validated over the course of the last 20 years. So using the color wheel, we have our strong or intense colors on here, starting with, of course, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Kind of goes around in a rainbow that's bent in a circle, which is essentially the color wheel. So when we look at those colors and we take them and we break them out of their true intense hue, those colors tend to drift to other directions. So red is red, and when we talk about color psychology, people are usually referring to the intense version of that color. So if you look online, there's a whole ton of descriptions about the color psychology or how red or any color will make you feel. I have noticed that most of those tend to be a copy from one site to another site to another site to another site, but not actually research that necessarily backs it up. Most of that information is what we call proprietary information. It was done by an automotive company or by a packaged goods company to support what they were selling at the time to their client. If you are fortunate enough to have worked in the industry like I have been able to ascertain some of that information, and I'm able to share it with you now. For instance, with the color red, if you look online, people will often say, well, it's the color of anger, it's the color of love. Some of that is just simply marketing. Red was associated with Valentine's because originally, is long, but red, let's put it this way. Red was associated to Valentine's, which was associated to a time that was marketed because it was all about love and the heart, and internally we all believe red. But if we take red and we make it pink by taking red and adding white to it or tinting it, it has a totally different connotation, or it has a different feel or an emotion attached to it. There was a study done numerous years ago where the people tested, they found that pink was a color that they actually associated to sweet. So that's why we nowadays tend to see pink associated to chocolate or to confectionery, where you're going in and you're purchasing sweet goods. And of course, pink has really transcended that and been part of all candy goods, or all kind of light colors with a warm tone have been associated to really the candy industry. Now, one of the studies, though, very interesting, that pink was painted on the walls in dairy factories in order to stop the smell of sour. So kind of an interesting way of looking at color as a visual cue to us mentally to not smell something, meaning it affects another sense. So that's really what color psychology is. It's like I said, we can reference things online and there's really quick references to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's validated. And if we move to another color like orange, if we don't think of orange necessarily in its pure form, but more as a diluted or tinted version, we think of it as peach or as terracotta, the other version of it where it's toned. And that color has been associated to food and movement over the last 15 or 20 years. In fact, it's been a color that was used heavily in the 70s and really has had trouble recovering from that because so many people associated to really bad 70s design. But orange in itself is really a color that most people associate to good food, warm, appetizing, delicious, yummy things like tomato sauce, oranges, fruit. Anyway, it's really a color that people really do gravitate towards. Whether they think about it or not for their home is a whole other question, mostly because, again, the 70s poisoned us. By the way, orange never gets cool, so it's always a warm color. So if you're looking for a color to keep your house warm at all times because you want to have that feeling, pick any version of an orange color. So it can have an orange undertone, or it could be orange lightened or darkened to give you the color that you like. Let's look at yellow. Yellow is the color that for most people, they really have a very strong aversion to or a very strong like of. I happen to be one of those people that absolutely loves the color yellow. Love it, love it. And I should tell you, yellow has been associated to the color of memory, and this comes from 3M. In some of their original studies, you can ask them, I'm sure they'll share it with you, when they were creating the original Post-it note, that's a yellow little sticky note that comes on a small pad and you stick it on the wall to remind yourself. They did their own research, and that's why I say it's proprietary, and they discovered that yellow was the color of memory, which is why they made Post-it notes yellow. Now there are multiple colors, yellow being only one of them, but it's also bright. Interestingly, again, going back to science, this is the brightest part of the color wheel that your eye reacts to the most as seeing as the strongest color. Now, we don't entirely know if that's true for your dog, at least I don't, but we know for humans, they react to this color spectrum the most as being the brightest. So maybe memory has more to do with brightness than it does to do with color. Blue. This is a color that is the #1 chosen color worldwide as people's favorite color. So you might want to test your friends and ask them what their favorite color is and see how many of them come back with blue. For most people, especially if you live anywhere near water, they'll often say it reminds them of being at the beach or happy because they're around water and nature. People absolutely love blue. I will say though, blue has been associated to a decrease in appetite. So for a split second, when people see blue, they too feel a little bit calmer. And in science, blue light focuses not directly on the center of your eye, but it tends to focus nearer, a little tiny bit back. So for a lot of people, it's a calming color because they don't see it as quickly as they see, say, reds or yellows. As a result of that, scientists, that it does decrease heart rate ever so slightly, which is why you might want to think about not using blue necessarily in your kitchen if you want to have that appetizing warm feel. On the other hand, if maybe you don't want to eat as much, blue might be the color you put on the wall. Green is the color of nature. No matter where you go in the world, you'll always see green, some version of it. And for most people, they find green, people will associate to being calming, but also energizing, depending on the version of the green. And of course, we see all sorts of ranges of green. Forest green or dark green, tinted green, does tend to be associated to luxury. In fact, all colors that are darker are associated to higher luxury items in a consumer marketing context, and that's simply been developed over time as learned behavior. Last but not least is purple, and purple is one of those colors that for a lot of people, they don't use a lot in home decor, but in psychology, it is a color that's used a lot in terms of understanding more offbeat colors. And I say that about purple simply because it's a color that it was in history very hard to make. You couldn't make purple the way you could make red, or you could produce yellow. You just could not produce purple until it was created in the mid-1800s by accident by a scientist who was trying to do something else, and he accidentally created the color purple that could be a dye. And that's why purple kind of missed the home decor train and got on really late. Prior to that, it was always reserved for royalty because it was actually made from, yes, snails. So imagine how small a snail is, and they had to create it from that to create natural purple. Today, it's associated for most people to royalty or to being a special color or to magic, things that are a little bit out of touch, out of our touch as a special color. A couple things to keep in mind with color psychology is really about not just what the internet says about color, but how you feel about color, whether you like a certain color combination and what it brings out for you, regardless of what the rules say. But here are some things that I've noticed over time using both the color wheel and color psychology. If I have a dark space, like a lower level space or a space that doesn't get a lot of sunlight, I really like to do a tint of yellow in the ceiling paint, because yellow is the brightest of all the colors, which means, as we know on the color wheel, because I can see it better, it helps to make the white feel brighter, and therefore a lower level or a basement space, for instance, doesn't get a lot of light, seem brighter. So that's a really good use of a color, and because I happen to like yellow, for me, it makes me feel good. On the other hand, if I want a space to not stand out as much, or I want to feel more comforted, I might use a dark color on a kitchen cabinet, for instance, because for me, it's not as bright. I might like a dark green or a medium tone green, like an olive, because for me, it makes me feel comforted or reminds me of nature. So instead of following the trends, I might pick a color because it really does do that in real life for me. What I probably don't want to do is, for me, when I get up in the morning, I have lots of red on my face. I probably don't want a wall behind me in the bathroom looking at my mirror with green, because it's going to intensify the red on my face and make it harder for me to feel happy when I get up in the morning, whereas I might like more of a neutral, something like a charcoal, which has no tone to it, or no undertone, or I may prefer a color that's a little, just because of my skin tone, that's a little bit more terracotta, peachy, pink taupe, dusty pink taupe, something that just gives me a little bit more of a mellow feel when I'm looking at my face. So you can see how color psychology and color theory can come together and give us the information that we need to live in our own life. Anyway, that's color psychology. There's lots more that you can have a look at. In our series, we're going to be talking about how to use color practically, because we live it in real life, and we will share it all with you so you can have a look at it and see what you think. I hope to see you in our next episode.